Hi everyone, this time I'm just going to cover something with respect to renaming the rows as well as the columns. And let us proceed. Here, renaming, I meant, for example, you have row index as well as column index. I just want to give altogether new name to it. It could be row wise or column wise. Let us actually start in terms of understanding how do we rename it. Okay, so we have the data and we use the method rename. Okay, so whenever I use the method rename, and there is something like mapper and index is there, is it? So I'll let me use the mapper and I'll tell you the operations of mapper. Mapper may, when we start looking at, you can actually provide the dictionary where you need to specify what row you want to replace. Okay, so let us start with this OD and let me replace this with uh, and I use colon and I just want to replace with, let's assume, OD, and I have multiple elements. Let's assume multiple values here. I just have ambassador here, and let me replace ambassador classic 2000 as let me make it AMP or something like that. I'll say axis 0 means, I just mentioned row wise. Okay, let me see that. And here you will be able to see that AMP and RD definitely here it's not replaceable. It's not replaced your original data. I'll tell you how do we replace as well. And here instead of this one you can mention row. It also works better, I believe. Yeah, so here you need to mention rows. Just try whether rows are working or not. Yes, it's working, right? Is it? Or you can also mention index. That also equally works better. Okay, so I'll say index and see that index. Index also works better. Three ways in which you can replace. And if you want to make permanent changes, and what you can do, you can say in place is equal to true. Let me try with that. In place is equal to true. I can actually see the data afterwards. So I can say data dot head. I'll be able to see it here, right? So now I can see that the permanent change happens in your data. And similarly, you can also do something here. You can also replace the columns. So the same thing we can actually apply. And let me look at data dot rename. And I just in this time I just won't use here axis is equal to 0 or index or something like that. Here axis is equal to 1 or axis is equal to columns. Okay, that will work better in terms of column replacement. Let me do one thing in this case. Let me start with this method and I say mapper, and whenever I use mapper here, and so I just use this dictionary operator. So I say that I just want to replace year with something called as year, and let me do one more replacement. I say selling price. I just want to replace with let's assume selling price or something like that. I say here x is equal to 1. That will work equally well. And here you can see that or I can work selling price is equal to columns, right? Right, that is also equally works well. Let's see that columns works better or not. That is also work better. Right, or this is one way in which, or I can actually get here, I can apply, and instead of looking at here, there is another way. I can say instead of mapper, I can say columns, or here in this case, axis, I don't require axis, so I can delete axis. I can say in place is equal to true. It will replace the same with the original data. Let's see that's working or not. I can see my data right now. Let's see that, data dot head. I can see that whether headings are changed or not. Yes, it's permanently changed. That is one way in which you can do. Okay, there is another way, is that usually what we do, we use data columns, right? Usually print the column names, right? For example, here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns are there, right? Is it true? So in this case, there is another way, that if you have 7 columns, you can actually have replacement with all columns simultaneously. But when you replace, you want to make sure that if you're using in this function, things should happen in a direct manner. The sense, for example, I'm just looking at columns. I'm just trying to see square bracket here. The first one, so I want to call it as year. Second one, I just want to call it as SP. Or the third one, I want to call it as km. And fourth one, I just want to call it as fuel. And fifth one, I just want to call it as seller type, and put in quotations and something like that. And I just want to call it as sixth one as transmission. Okay, so I want to call it as OWN. Okay, something like that. So if you have 7, and I need to replace exactly 7 number. Okay, so that's the way in which it will work. And let me try here. And if you see your data, let me see data head, you can see, look at here, everything is getting replaced in this case, right? So you'll be able to see that this is another way. But here there is a condition, so whenever you replace with these columns, you need to make sure the exactly same number of replacement should be done on the right hand side. Okay, that's it. I believe you understood.